Today we're going to do the review of trial day 18. On the stand today is finish up testimony with Brian Higgins, and then we're going to move on to some doctors, transportation workers, and crime lab workers as well. So let's get into it. Welcome back, late night reviewers. Just taking a step back to yesterday's trial of trial day 17. We ended the day with Brian Higgins on the stand. He had just been asked the question about if he had chopped up the SIM card from his phone, drove onto a military base, threw the SIM card in one trash can, and threw the phone into another. And he had responded saying, no, he didn't do that. Judge Beverly ended the testimony after he was then asked a follow-up question. So do we get any answers to those questions that Judge Beverly ended the day with yesterday? Yes, we do. As we continue with this testimony with Brian Higgins and his shady phone behavior, as you probably remember from yesterday, he used his friend from the FBI to help him pull the conversation between him and Karen Reed off of his phone so he could give to the Canton police. Yes, he is part of the police department, but
let's move on from that.
And yes, they could have done that themselves. However, this is part of the problem, right, with this whole entire case, the corruption within this case. So he did take that conversation off. He gave it to them, and then he got his phone, got the SIM card out of the phone, cut it up, break it, whatever he wants to say, destroy it, took it onto a military base. He did throw the phone and the SIM card into the trash on the military base, and so we did find that out. As I read the conversation here between him and Karen, we got that text conversation. However, we didn't get any other conversation because he did not pull any other conversation off of his phone between anybody else except for Karen. As we know, to this point now, he had been in contact with other officers, including Brian Albert, and we got none of that. As I always like to say, you can dress it up however you want, but it is what it is. So he got rid of the phone on a military base, removing the SIM card before doing so, and also disposing of the SIM card. So just with that alone, we now cannot trust anything else because he only chose to give us the conversation with him and Karen Reed. And that is absolutely ridiculous.
You hide nothing if you have nothing to hide.
Clearly, lots to be hidden here. He was asked about doing a factory reset on his phone before discarding it, and he said no. But at a prior hearing, he told them he had done a factory reset before getting rid of the phone. So, the last hearing he was in, he was also under oath. He said he did do a factory reset before getting rid of it. In today's hearing, he's saying no, he didn't. So we already have the behavior of that he did do a factory reset. Now, he didn't do a factory reset. He only pulled Karen Reed and his conversation off of his phone, nobody else's. And then he pulled the SIM card out of the phone and deposited and disposed of the phone and the SIM card on this military base, not just a regular trash can. So that's where we're at with him. So clearly lots to be hidden there and stuff we will never know because, well, that evidence is gone. So that's where we're at with that. He didn't agree that he said that in the last testimony or in the last hearing, but he was handed the transcript from the court and he did read it and it said what he said, but he just didn't agree that he said that. So that's where we're at with that. Brian's explanation for why he threw his phone and the chopped up SIM card into a trash bag onto a military base was because he said he had trash in his car, and so when he drove through the military base, he just threw it in the trash.
Now, if you want to believe that,
then I will sell you some oceanfront property in Arizona. He was also asked specifically if he asked his friend who worked for the FBI if he could pull the other conversations off of his phone, and he said no, he didn't ask. So he only asked for Karen's, clearly trying to incriminate only her in this whole process. So an interesting little tidbit of information that came out during Mr. Lowley's questioning, and he had asked him, why did you get rid of your phone? And Brian said it was because he was working a case where an individual somehow had got a hold of his personal cell phone number on the internet. The person contacted him and he figured he needed to get rid of his phone number. He didn't change his phone number when he claimed that happened in July. He didn't change it until September. So in a way, this kind of contradicts his own testimony because he's saying that this individual somehow got a hold of his phone number And so he said, okay, I'm going to change my phone number so this person can't get a hold of me anymore. So he did that. But then he went and got rid of the phone too. Like, come on.
Come on. Do you really expect us to believe that?
I'm just kind of curious if Mr. Lally believes the testimony his clients are giving. Sometimes I honestly feel like when they take breaks and then they come back, they all of a sudden have like a certain answer to respond to these questions, and it feels coached or advised or recommended, whatever you want to call it. That's what it looks like, because prior to the break they are giving a different answer or didn't have an answer, and then after the break all of a sudden they have an answer. And so that's how we ended it, with his reasoning for why he got rid of the phone after he just said on the stand saying he needed to get rid of his phone number, which he did, but then also in turn chopped up the SIM card and disposed of the phone and the SIM card on a military base. So that's where we ended testimony with Brian Higgins. So then the next person on the stand we will not see, because it was actually a juvenile, so we got no name, we got no information, we got no video footage, we got no sound footage, there was nothing. So who knows what this person said, who knows what they heard, who knows how their testimony influenced the case. So this is unfortunately information we won't have to help us make an informed decision about this case. However, we will move on to the next person on the stand who was not a juvenile, and that was Justin Rice. Justin Rice is one of the doctors at Good Samaritan Hospital in Canton, and he was one of the treating physicians of John O'Keefe when he came into the emergency room. He also treated Karen Reed for the Section 12 because of her wanting to harm herself. He was asked quite a bit of questions by Mr. Lowley of what he observed or what he saw with Karen and John. However, he was basing his answers off of the written report from the treatment. So once Miss Yannetti went and asked questions and finally came to the conclusion of like, well, do you even remember treating Karen? And he said, no. It's like, well, do you remember writing these reports? And he says, no. So, but that's not to say that he didn't write the reports. It may just be because he treats a lot of individuals every day. He has to write a lot of reports. So naturally, you may not remember every single patient and every single report you write. However, when a particular medic is stating that John may have been struck by a vehicle, Dr. Rice didn't include that into his report. It's like, that's a pretty big piece of information you should have put into your report, and it's not in there. So Miss Yannetti questioned him about his report, and that he basically only observed or reported the abrasions on the inside of John's arm and one scratch above his eye, but did not report any other injuries to his body, back, shoulders, chest, ribs, etc. He said he didn't write any information about any other type of injuries was because his job was just to resuscitate the patient. So he wasn't paying attention to any other injuries. And so that's the end of testimony with Justin Rice. And so the next one on the stand was Gary Fowler. Gary Fowler is a pathologist at Good Samaritan Hospital, and in his report, he noted that Karen's blood was tested that day by a phlebotomist, and it was processed and came back at 93 milligrams per decimeter. And he explained that the process that they take to get that information is different than that of a lab that actually processes looking for a specific thing in the bloodstream, and that their processes are different and more detailed and can give you a more accurate or percentage of what it is that they are looking for in testing. And he explained that the reason why they test is just to get a base idea to help the doctors treat the patient who's in the hospital. And he also said that alcohol results will come out higher than what is in the blood because of the processes that they use at the hospital. So though this is the information they give us about Karen's alcohol level, it's not the actual number. And there are other various factors that come into play to get the correct or more accurate number. And he said there are also other body processes that will affect the levels as well. You are so lucky I am the one doing the summary for you, because that was pretty grueling testimony and it was very hard to hear him talk. They actually ended up having to shut off the fans so that way they could hear him. Even though he was speaking as loud as he could, he was very monotone and very quiet. So you got a real good summary there and saved yourself a good 30 minutes. Next on the stand is Nicholas Roberts. Now, Nicholas worked at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab Toxicology Department. He said they use a conversion to test blood. Things like how much the person has ate or how much water the person has drank will affect the results. He said that based off the information he was given, which was 12:45 a.m., is when Karen had her last drink of alcohol. And he said that if it was earlier than 12:45 a.m. or later than 12:45 a.m., such as like a 10 to 30 minute window, it wouldn't change the result by much, if any. He said they base the calculations on many unknown factors and have to make guesses a lot to get to their conclusions. He said he used the time of 12:45 a.m. as Karen's last drink because that's what the police reported to him. And this was not reported to him by Karen herself. It was information given to him by the police. So since he was given this information by the police themselves instead of Karen herself, well, then we have a big error because who knows? Maybe that was Karen's last drink. Maybe she drank some more later. Maybe she even stopped drinking before then. We don't know. But again, this is going to affect the results because, like he said, there are many guesses, but for this particular time, he based it off of the police's report. And is Michael Trotter. Michael Trotter is the superintendent of the Public Works in Canton. So he's the one who organizes the drivers to plow the different roads for upcoming snowstorms. Michael Proctor called Mr. Trotter to ask about the plow list. He said he doesn't remember, but may have told him who specifically was plowing 34 Fairview. But he also said that Michael Proctor never asked him to speak to Brian Laughlin. This Brian is the driver of the plow truck that plowed 34 Fairview. That was what we got out of Mr. Trotter. And the next one on the stand is Louis Jutras. He is the manager of the Information Systems of Finance Department for the town of Canton. He said he was contacted by the state police about security cameras among Cantons such as the library and town hall. He said he provided the police with the surveillance footage and that he did not review the footage before giving it to the police. He just complied with what they were requesting. He said that they requested the footage for January 29th from the time of 12 to 1 a.m. and from 5 to 6 a.m. Said that he didn't review any of the footage. He just sent it to the police. So if there's any pieces that may have been missing, he wouldn't know because he didn't review it. So he doesn't even know if the police received a full 1 hour out of each of those time slots or if it was partialed, if it was later edited. He has no idea. Nor will we ever find out the truth because no police officers ever told him to download that specific time or that day of surveillance footage to make sure the system wouldn't delete it within 30 days or less, which is a total possibility for them to do, to save that information. But no police officers ever asked him to make sure that that information was downloaded and not deleted. So, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. How do you feel about the fact that nobody requested this surveillance footage to be downloaded or saved? That upsets me because I know that's possible. At one point in my life, I was robbed at gunpoint, and I was able to track them with the use of my credit card. Myself and a police officer went over to this Walgreens. They talked to them and said, yes, we have the footage from that day. And so they said, okay, you need to save that footage. This is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I don't live in Albuquerque, but this is where this took place. This was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That police officer said, okay, I need you to save this camera footage. And then also they downloaded the footage and gave it to him on a DVD. I mean, this wasn't even a murder case, but the officer knew to tell Walgreens to save this information and to not delete the surveillance footage. So I find that really frustrating that the police department didn't tell them to save this information. But whatever. What do you guys think about that or anything else that we heard from testimony from these individuals today? You are so lucky I'm doing these reviews for you because though you didn't get a lot of information out of that, it was enough information and it was a rough day to watch all that testimony because it was very, very boring. So you're very lucky I saved you 7 hours of testimony. With that, that's the end of the review and I will see you back tomorrow for trial day 19.